My wife cheated, lied about business trips for months, and left me without warning, but I uncovered the truth, exposed her in front of her lawyer, and rebuilt a better life without her. Ethan Brooks leaned back in his office chair, the faint hum of Portland's downtown traffic filtering through the window of his architecture firm. The clock on his desk read 6:17 p.m., and the golden light of late afternoon spilled across blueprints and coffee mugs. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of a long day spent refining designs for a new community center. It was good work he loved, but it left him drained, ready to trade the sharp lines of his drafting table for the softer edges of home. His phone buzzed, vibrating against a stack of papers. Laura's name lit up the screen and a small smile tugged at his lips. Maybe she was calling about dinner, takeout from that Thai place they liked, or, if he was lucky, one of her rare home-cooked meals. He swiped to answer, cradling the phone against his shoulder as he tidied his desk. "Hey, hon," he said, voice warm. "What's up?" There was a pause, brief but heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. When Laura spoke, her tone was flat, stripped of its usual cadence. "Ethan, I want a divorce." The words hit like a physical blow, sharp and sudden. His hand froze mid-motion, a pen dangling between his fingers. "What?" he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to tilt, the edges of his vision blurring as if the world itself had lost its bearings. "I've thought about it for a while," Laura continued, her words clipped, precise. "It's not working. I don't want to drag this out." "Laura, wait, what are you talking about?" Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He stood, pacing to the window as if movement could anchor him. "Where is this coming from? Can we at least talk?" "There's nothing to talk about." Her voice was a wall, unyielding. "You'll hear from my lawyer. His name's Mark Sanders. He'll handle everything." "Lawyer?" Ethan's mind scrambled, grasping for sense. "Laura, this is insane. Can you just tell me what's going on, please?" "I have to go," she said, and the line went dead. He stared at the phone, the screen dark, as if it might offer answers. His chest tightened, a mix of panic and disbelief clawing at him. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of mornings, fights, laughter, plans, dissolved in a single call. He tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Her voice, recorded and cheerful, mocked him. "This is Laura. Leave a message." Ethan sank into his chair, the office suddenly too quiet, too still, the blueprints on his desk blurred as his thoughts raced. What had he missed? Was it his long hours? Something he'd said, something he hadn't. The drive home was a haze. Portland streets, usually a comforting rhythm of lights and corners, felt alien. Rain streaked the windshield, the wiper's steady thump the only sound as Ethan replayed the call. Laura's voice, so cold, so final, looped in his mind. He'd always thought of her as polished, a marketing exec who could charm a room or close a deal with a smile. But this was something else. Distant, unreachable. He pulled into their suburban driveway, the craftsman-style house they'd bought 5 years ago looming in the dusk. Its sage-green siding and white trim usually felt like a hug, a promise of warmth. Tonight it was just a building, its windows dark. Ethan sat in the car, keys still in hand, unwilling to face the silence inside. When he finally stepped through the front door, the air was stale, heavy with absence. Laura's coat wasn't on the rack, her sneakers usually kicked off by the door were gone. He flicked on the kitchen light, half expecting to see her at the counter. Sipping tea, ready to laugh and say it was a mistake, but the counter was bare save for a single, unwashed mug. It's from that morning. Ethan's legs felt unsteady as he moved to the living room. He sank onto the couch, staring at the coffee table where they'd played board games, argued over takeout, planned their future. His mind churned, searching for cracks in their life he'd overlooked. Had she been unhappy? She'd been busier lately, more trips for work, more late nights. But she'd always said it was temporary, just the grind of a big campaign. He'd believed her. Why wouldn't he? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through their texts. The last one from her was from yesterday. "Running late, don't wait up." Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. Further back, though, he noticed the shift. Fewer emojis, shorter replies. When had that started? A month ago? 2? "God, Laura," he muttered, voice breaking. "What happened to us?" The house was too big without her. Ethan wandered from room to room, each one a museum of their life together. The kitchen, where they'd danced to old jazz records while cooking on lazy Sundays. The bedroom, where they'd whispered about kids, about growing old. The backyard, where they'd hosted barbecues. Laura's laugh brighter than the string lights. He stopped in his woodworking studio, a converted garage filled with the scent of cedar and sawdust. His tools hung neatly on the wall, a half-finished table waiting on sawhorses. This was his sanctuary, where he'd carve and sand until the world made sense again. But tonight, even this felt hollow. He ran a hand over the teasing edge, remembering how Laura used to tease him about his sawdust obsession. She'd lean in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching him work. When had she stopped coming out here? Ethan's mind flashed to their last vacation. A week in Cannon Beach, walking the shore, her hand in his. She'd seemed happy, hadn't she? Laughing as waves chased them, stealing bites of his ice cream? Or had he just seen what he wanted to see? Doubt gnawed at him, each memory now suspect. Had there been signs? A glance she'd avoided, a conversation cut short? He returned to the couch, the weight of the unknown pressing down. Divorce. The word felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else's life. He wasn't naive. Marriages ended, sure, but theirs? They'd fought, like anyone, but never anything big, never anything like this. Ethan buried his face in his hands, the silence of the house deafening. He wanted to scream, to demand answers. But there was no one to hear. Just him, alone, in a home that no longer felt like his. Ethan sat in the waiting room of Mark Sanders' office, the sterile hum of fluorescent lights doing little to calm his nerves. The space was all glass and sharp angles, a downtown Portland law firm that screamed efficiency over empathy. His hands gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles white, as he tried to steady his breathing. It had been 3 days since Laura's call, 3 days of sleepless nights and unanswered texts. Now he was here, about to face her lawyer, a man who, for all Ethan knew, held the keys to his unraveling life. The receptionist called his name, and Ethan followed her down a hallway to a conference room. Mark Sanders stood as he entered, a man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and a handshake that was firm but not crushing. His suit was crisp, his expression practiced, professional, but with a flicker of something else. Guilt? Pity? Ethan couldn't tell. "Mr. Brooks, thanks for coming," Mark said, gesturing to a chair. "I know this is a difficult time." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, difficult doesn't really cover it." He sat, folding his hands on the table to keep them from shaking. "I just want to understand why. Laura won't talk to me. She said to come to you." Mark's eyes softened for a moment before returning to neutral. He opened a folder, pulling out a stack of papers. "Laura has instructed me to handle the divorce proceedings. She's seeking a dissolution of the marriage, with a proposed settlement for assets and finances." "Settlement?" Ethan's voice rose, sharper than he intended. "She drops this on me out of nowhere, and now we're talking settlements? I don't even know why she's doing this. Is there someone else?" Mark hesitated, his pen pausing over the folder. "I'm not at liberty to discuss personal motivations beyond what's in the filing. Laura's position is that the marriage is irretrievably broken. My role is to ensure this process is fair and efficient." Ethan leaned forward, searching Mark's face for cracks. "Fair? She blindsides me, won't give me a reason, and you're calling this fair? You've got to know something. Give me something." Mark shifted in his seat, his composure wavering. "I understand this is painful, Mr. Brooks, but my job is to represent Laura's interests. I'd suggest you retain your own counsel to protect yours." Ethan's jaw clenched. He wanted to slam his fist on the table to demand answers, but Mark's guarded expression told him he'd get nowhere. Instead, he sat back, defeat settling in his chest like damp rot. "Fine, what's next?" Mark slid a document across the table, a preliminary settlement proposal. Ethan's eyes scanned it, the numbers and logogos blurring together. Half the savings, the house, alimony. It was real, starkly real, and yet it explained nothing. As he left the office, the Portland rain had started again, a fine mist that clung to his jacket. He stood on the sidewalk, the weight of Mark's words pressing down. Laura wasn't just leaving, she was erasing him, and her lawyer was complicit in keeping him in the dark. Back home, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the settlement papers spread out like a crime scene. The house was quiet, save for the faint drip of a faucet he'd meant to fix months ago. He poured a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light, and stared at it as if it might hold answers. 10 years, a decade of building a life with Laura, holidays, arguments, lazy mornings, reduced to this stack of cold demand. He closed his eyes, letting memories flood in. Their wedding in a small vineyard outside Salem, Laura's smile brighter than the summer sun. Their first night in this house, eating pizza on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived. Even the fights, over money, over time, over nothing, had felt like part of something solid, something worth keeping. But now he saw the cracks he'd ignored. Laura's late nights at the office, chalked up to her big promotion. The way she'd started traveling more, always with a polished excuse. A conference in Seattle, a client in San Francisco. He'd trusted her, hadn't he? He'd wanted to, but the truth was she'd been pulling away, her warmth fading like a signal losing strength. Ethan's mind snagged on their last anniversary, 6 months ago. He'd planned it carefully. A dinner at their favorite restaurant, a bottle of her favorite Pinot Noir. She'd been there, physically, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone, her laughs a beat too late. He'd asked if she was okay and she'd brushed it off, said it was just work stress. He'd believed her. God, he'd been so stupid. He took a sip of the bourbon, the burn grounding him. The settlement papers stared back, a reminder that Laura wasn't just gone, she was rewriting their story, and he was the fool left out of the script. By the next morning, Ethan couldn't stand the silence anymore. He called Ben Carter, his best friend since college, a lawyer who'd always been more brother than advisor. Ben picked up on the second ring, his voice steady, familiar. "Ethan, man, you okay?" Ben asked, sensing the strain without needing details. "No," Ethan admitted, pacing the living room. "Laura wants a divorce. Out of nowhere. I met her lawyer yesterday and it's like I'm being erased. She won't tell me why." Ben let out a low whistle. "Jesus, I'm sorry, buddy, that's a gut punch. What'd the lawyer say?" "Nothing useful, just handed me papers and told me to get my own lawyer." Ethan's voice cracked. "I don't even know where to start, Ben. I keep thinking there's got to be a reason, something I missed." There was a pause, then Ben's tone shifted, firm but kind. "Listen, you're not going to like hearing this, but you need to protect yourself. Laura's got a head start. She's got a lawyer, a plan. You need to catch up. Start pulling financial records, bank statements, anything you can get your hands on. Track her moves, see if there's a pattern." "Track her?" Ethan stopped pacing, the idea sitting heavy. "That feels, I don't know, like I'm spying on her." "You're not spying," Ben said bluntly. "You're surviving. She's not playing fair, Ethan. You don't owe her blind trust anymore." Ethan sank onto the couch, rubbing his temple. "I just want to know why, you know? I thought we were good. Not perfect, but good." "I get it," Ben said softly, "and we'll figure out the why, but right now you need to focus on what's in front of you. Get those records. I'll help you find a lawyer if you want, someone who'll fight for you." Ethan nodded, though Ben couldn't see it. "Okay, yeah, I'll start digging." "Good," Ben said. "And Ethan, you're not alone in this. Call me anytime, day or night." Hanging up, Ethan felt a spark of something new. Not hope, not yet, but resolve. The grief was still there, raw and heavy, but Ben's words had shifted it, turned it into a question he could act on. Why had Laura done this? What was she hiding? For the first time since her call, Ethan wasn't just drowning in the loss, he was looking for answers. Ethan sat across from Ben in the small conference room of Ben's law office, a cluttered space in southeast Portland that smelled faintly of old books and coffee. Papers were spread across the table, Nina's report, financial records, and a draft of a counterproposal Ben had been working on for days. The photos of Laura and Derek lay face down. Ethan couldn't stomach looking at them again. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the storm brewing in his chest. "We've got enough to turn this around," Ben said, tapping a pen against the table. His voice was steady, lawyer mode fully engaged. "Nina's evidence is airtight. Hotel receipts, emails, timelines. Laura's narrative about this being a mutual drift doesn't hold up. She's been planning this, Ethan, and we can use that." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. The betrayal still burned, but the past week had hardened something in him. He wasn't just the wounded husband anymore. He was a man with proof, with leverage. "What's the plan?" he asked, leaning forward. Ben slid a document toward him, a revised settlement proposal. "We counter her offer. Keep it fair but firm. No alimony. She's got her own income, and we've got evidence she's been funneling money into that hidden account. Split the savings evenly, but you keep the house. It's your studio, your space. She doesn't get to walk away with everything." Ethan skimmed the pages, the numbers and clauses a stark contrast to the chaos of his emotions. "And when we show her the evidence? What then?" "That's the pivot," Ben said, a glint in his eye. "We don't just drop it on her. We do it strategically. In front of her lawyer, Mark Sanders. He's got to see she's been lying to him too. It'll shift the dynamic, make her scramble. She'll either fold or lash out, but either way, you're in control." Ethan's fingers traced the edge of the table, his woodworking calluses catching on the wood. Control. The word felt foreign after weeks of being blindsided, but it was starting to fit. "I want to look her in the eye when we do it," he said quietly. "I need to see her reaction." Ben studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, we'll set it up for next week. Neutral ground, Sanders' office. You stay calm, let the evidence speak. I'll handle the rest. As Ethan left the office, the Portland air was crisp, the first hint of fall creeping in. He walked to his car, the weight of the plan settling over him. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming his life, piece by piece, from the ruins Laura had left behind. The conference room at Mark Sanders' firm felt smaller this time, the glass walls closing in as Ethan sat beside Ben. Across the table, Laura looked polished as ever, blonde hair pulled back, navy blazer crisp, but there was a tightness around her eyes, a crack in her usual composure. Mark sat next to her, his expression neutral, though Ethan caught a flicker of unease when their eyes met. Thanks for coming, Mark began, his tone clipped. We're here to discuss the settlement and hopefully move toward an agreement. Ben didn't waste time. We've reviewed Laura's proposal, he said, his voice smooth but firm, and we have a counteroffer. But before we get to that, there's something Ethan wants to address. All eyes turned to Ethan. His heart pounded, but he kept his gaze steady, locked on Laura. I know about Derek, he said, the words cutting through the room like a blade. I know about the affair, the hotels, the dinners, the gifts. 8 months, Laura. You've been lying to me, to everyone, for 8 months. Laura's face froze, her lips parting slightly. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but Ethan didn't give her the chance. He slid Nina's report across the table, the photos and receipts spilling out in a damning cascade. It's all here, he said. Every trip you said was for work. Every night you said you were alone. Mark reached for the papers, his brow furrowing as he scanned them. Ethan, this is... It's the truth, Ethan cut in, his voice low but unyielding. She's been building a whole other life while I was trying to save ours. I deserve better than that, and you, Mark, deserve to know what you're really representing. Laura's composure cracked. This is ridiculous, she snapped, her voice sharp but unsteady. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not what you think. What I think? Ethan's laugh was bitter, hollow. I have emails, Laura. Pictures of you two laughing like I didn't exist. You don't get to rewrite this. Mark held up a hand, his face tight. Let's take a step back. Laura, is there any truth to this? She hesitated, her eyes darting between Mark and the papers. It's complicated, she said finally, her voice smaller now. But this doesn't change anything. I still want the divorce. Ethan leaned back, the fire in his chest cooling to something colder, steadier. She wasn't sorry. She was defensive, cornered, and for the first time he saw her not as his wife, but as someone who'd chosen to hurt him, again and again. Ben took over, sliding the counter-proposal across the table. Based on what we've uncovered, we think this is more equitable, he said, his tone professional but pointed. Equal split of the savings, no alimony, and Ethan keeps the house. Laura, you've got your career, your accounts. This reflects that. Laura's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. You're trying to punish me? She said, glaring at Ethan. This isn't fair. It's vindictive. Fair. Ethan's voice was quiet, but it carried. Fair was trusting you. Fair was believing we were in this together. You don't get to talk about fair now. Mark cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. I think we need time to review this, he said, gathering the papers. Laura, we'll need to discuss how to proceed. Ben nodded, packing up his briefcase. Take your time, but the evidence isn't going anywhere. As they stood to leave, Laura's gaze met Ethan's, and for a moment, he thought he saw something. Regret, maybe, or fear, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the same cold wall she'd built weeks ago. Ethan turned away, following Ben out of the room, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. Outside, the rain had stopped, the sky a pale gray. Ethan exhaled, his breath visible in the cool air. That was intense, he said, glancing at Ben. You did good, Ben replied, clapping him on the shoulder. You held your ground. She's rattled, and that's exactly where we want her. Ethan nodded, but his mind was already drifting past the confrontation, past Laura's stunned face. For the first time in weeks, he felt lighter, not whole, not yet, but unburdened, like a man who'd finally stepped out of a collapsing house. Ethan sat at the dining room table, surrounded by a fortress of bank statements, credit card bills, and scribbled notes. The house was dark except for the glow of his laptop and a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. It had been a week since his meeting with Mark Sanders, and Ben's advice to dig into Laura's finances had turned into a nightly ritual. At first it felt wrong, like rummaging through her diary, but every new discovery chipped away at his guilt. He started with their joint accounts, expecting nothing out of the ordinary, but then he found it. A separate account in Laura's name, one he'd never seen before. The statements, accessed through a forgotten login she'd left on their shared laptop, showed a trail of transactions that didn't add up. Hotel charges in Seattle, when she'd said she was at a conference in Chicago, a $400 dinner at a Portland restaurant he'd never heard of, on a night she'd claimed to be working late. Boutique purchases, spa days, a pattern of extravagance that wasn't her, or at least, wasn't the Laura he thought he knew. Ethan's coffee went cold as he cross-referenced dates. A hotel stay last month coincided with a weekend she'd been too busy to spend with him. A jewelry charge from a shop downtown, $1,200, hit the same day she'd canceled their dinner plans. His stomach churned, the numbers painting a picture he wasn't ready to face. Betrayal wasn't just a feeling now, it was receipts, timestamp. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. The house creaked, a familiar sound that used to mean home but now just amplified the emptiness. He wanted to call Laura, to scream, to demand why she'd built this secret life, but he knew she'd deflect, just like she had on the phone. No, he needed more than accusations. He needed the truth, undeniable and laid bare. The next morning, Ethan met Ben at a coffee shop in their suburban neighborhood, a cozy spot with exposed brick and the smell of roasted beans. Ben slid into the booth across from him, his sharp eyes scanning Ethan's face. "You look like hell, man," he said, half joking, but his tone carried worry. Ethan managed a grim smile, pushing a folder of printed bank statements across the table. "Found this. Laura's got a hidden account. Hotels, dinners, stuff that doesn't make sense. It's bad, Ben." Ben flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing as he skimmed the highlighted charges. "Jesus," he muttered. "This isn't just careless spending. This is deliberate." He set the folder down, meeting Ethan's gaze. "You sure you want to keep going? Once you open this door, there's no closing it." "I need to know," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "I can't keep guessing. It's killing me." Ben nodded, leaning back. "All right, then you need a professional, someone who can dig deeper, find what's behind this without tipping her off." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "And Nina Royce, private investigator. She's discreet, thorough, and doesn't mess around. I've worked with her before, she's good." Ethan hesitated, the idea of hiring a PI feeling like a step into a world he didn't belong in. A private investigator? I don't know, Ben, it feels like I'm crossing a line. "You're not the one who drew the line," Ben said bluntly. "Laura did. She's hiding something, and you deserve to know what. Nina's not about drama, she'll get you facts, that's it." Ethan stared into his coffee, the steam curling up like a question mark. He thought of Laura's voice on that call, cold and final, and the months of distance that had grown between them. If he didn't do this, he'd be left with nothing but doubts. "Okay," he said finally. "Set it up." By that afternoon, Ethan was in Nina Royce's office, a no-nonsense space tucked above a bookstore in Northeast Portland. Nina was in her late 30s, with short dark hair and a calm, assessing gaze that made Ethan feel both reassured and exposed. She listened as he explained. Laura's call, the hidden account, the charges, taking notes with quick, precise movement. "I'll need access to whatever you've got," Nina said, her voice steady. "Bank records, emails if you have them, her work schedule, anything that gives me a starting point. I'll be discreet, Mr. Brooks. No one will know I'm looking." Ethan handed over the folder of statements, his fingers lingering on it for a moment. "Just find out what's going on, please." Nina gave a small nod, her expression unreadable but kind. "I will. Give me a week, maybe 2. I'll call you when I have something." As Ethan left her office, the weight in his chest hadn't lifted, but it had shifted. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting, he was moving forward, chasing the truth instead of running from it. 10 days later, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "Can you meet today, 2 p.m., my office?" His heart thudded as he read it, knowing this was the moment he'd been dreading and craving. He called in sick to work, barely able to focus as he drove across town, the Portland skyline a gray blur against the rain. Nina was waiting for him, a manila envelope on her desk. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I've got answers," she said, sliding the envelope toward him. "It's not pretty, but it's thorough." Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were photos, receipts, and a typed report. The first photo hit like a punch. Laura, laughing, her arm around a man at a candlelit restaurant. The man was polished, mid-40s, with a smug smile Ethan instantly hated. More photos followed, the two of them at a hotel bar, walking hand in hand on a Seattle pier, her head on his shoulder in a park. His name's Derek Lane, Nina said, her tone neutral, vice president at Laura's firm. The affair started at least 8 months ago based on what I found. Hotel records, credit card charges, even some emails I pulled from a work account she didn't secure well. They've been careful, but not careful enough. Ethan flipped through the report, his eyes catching phrases like romantic getaways and gifts totaling $3,000, 0 cents. Dates lined up with Laura's work trips, her excuses now exposed as lies. The affair had been going on before she'd even hinted at divorce, months of deception while Ethan had been planning their future. He set the papers down, his throat tight. 8 months, he said, almost to himself. She was living this whole other life. Nina leaned forward slightly. I'm sorry, Ethan, I know this is rough. But you've got what you need now. Proof, leverage. What you do with it is up to you. Ethan stared at the photos, Laura's smile a stranger's. He felt crushed, the weight of her betrayal pressing down until he could barely breathe. But beneath it, something else stirred, a clarity, sharp and cold. He wasn't the one who'd broken their marriage, she had. And for the first time, he felt the ground beneath him steady, even if it was littered with the wreckage of what they'd been. Ethan woke to the sound of rain pattering against the windows, a soft rhythm that matched the quiet of his new routine. The house, once a battlefield of memories, was starting to feel like his again. He padded to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and stood by the sink, watching droplets race down the glass. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation at Mark Sanders' office, and though the divorce wasn't final, the storm in his chest had begun. He spent his mornings in the woodworking studio now, the scent of cedar and the hum of his sander grounding him. The half-finished table from months ago was complete, its edges smooth under his hands, a testament to something he could still build. He'd started new projects too, a bookshelf, a set of chairs, each one a small rebellion against the chaos Laura had left behind. The work wasn't a cure, but it was a tether, pulling him back to himself, one cut at a time. The house felt different too. He'd moved the furniture, repainted the living room a soft gray, packed away the photos of their old life. The changes were small but deliberate, like carving out space for a future he couldn't yet see. Pain still lingered, flashes of Laura's laugh, her perfume on a forgotten scarf. But it was manageable now, a bruise instead of a wound. Ethan sipped his coffee, the warmth spreading through him. He wasn't whole, not yet, but he was here, standing in his kitchen, and that was enough for today. On a crisp Saturday, Ethan wandered through a craft market in his Portland suburb, the air alive with chatter and the scent of fresh bread. He hadn't planned to come, but the house had felt too still and he craved noise, people, something to remind him the world was still turning. Stalls lined the street, offering pottery, candles, and hand-knit scarves, their colors bright against the gray sky. He was admiring a carved wooden bowl when a familiar voice called his name. Ethan? Ethan Brooks? He turned to see Lily Reynolds, an old college friend, her dark curls tucked under a knit cap. She grinned, her face as open and warm as he remembered. Lily, he said, surprised by how easily his smile came. It's been forever. They fell into step, catching up as they wove through the crowd. Lily was an artist now, teaching ceramics and selling her work at markets like this. She was vibrant, grounded, her laugh cutting through the noise like a bell. Ethan found himself talking, really talking, about his studio, his projects, even the divorce, though he kept it vague. She listened, her eyes steady, no judgment, just presence. Sounds like you're finding your way, she said as they paused by a coffee cart, steam rising from their cups. That's no small thing. He shrugged, but her words stuck. Trying to, at least. They parted with a promise to grab coffee soon, and as Ethan drove home, he realized he'd been laughing, real unforced laughter, for the first time in months. Lily wasn't a fix, wasn't a replacement for what he'd lost, but she was a spark, a reminder that life could still surprise him. A few days later, Ethan's phone pinged with an email from Nina Royce, a final report he hadn't asked for but wasn't surprised to see. He sat at the dining table, the house quiet except for the low hum of a jazz record he'd put on. The email was brief, professional, but its contents hit like a distant echo. Laura and Derek's relationship was unraveling. Nina had tracked their movements, fewer dinners, no more hotel stays. Financial records showed strain, Laura dipping into savings, Derek's name off recent leases. A colleague had mentioned arguments at work, Derek pulling away, Laura less scrambling to keep up appearances. She was alone now, Nina wrote, isolated in a way that felt like poetic justice. Ethan read the report twice, waiting for triumph to kick in. It didn't. Instead, there was a hollow sort of closure, like closing a book he'd outgrown. Laura's choices had led her here, just as his were leading him somewhere else. He didn't hate her. Not anymore. He didn't need to. He deleted the email, not out of anger, but because it no longer mattered. The record spun on, saxophone notes curling through the air, and Ethan leaned back, letting the music fill the space where her shadow used to be. Ethan met Lily for coffee a week after the craft market at a small cafe tucked into a Portland side street. The place was warm, with mismatched mugs and chalkboard menus, the kind of spot that felt like a secret. Lily was already there, sketching in a notebook, her fingers smudged with charcoal. She looked up as he approached, her smile bright and unguarded. "Thought you might bail," she teased, closing her sketchbook. "Big architect too busy for coffee." He laughed, sliding into the chair across from her. "Yeah, right. My empire of blueprints can wait an hour." Their conversation flowed easily, like picking up a song mid-verse. They talked about art, her ceramics, his woodworking, then drifted to food, music, the quirks of Portland's neighborhood. Ethan found himself sharing stories he hadn't told in years. The time he'd bought a college presentation, the summer he'd built a treehouse for his cousin. Lily matched him, her tales of late-night pottery sessions and disastrous gallery openings, laced with humor and warmth. By their third coffee date, Ethan realized he was looking forward to these moments more than anything else in his week. Lily wasn't pushing, wasn't asking for anything beyond what they had. Sangha master, a shared slice of pie when the mood struck. But there was something in the way she listened, the way her eyes lit up when he talked about a new project, that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. One evening, as they lingered outside the cafe, the streetlights casting a soft glow, Lily nudged his shoulder. "You're good company, Ethan Brooks," she said, her voice light but sincere. "Don't let anyone tell you different." He smiled, the words settling into him like a warm coal. "You're not so bad yourself, Reynolds." Ethan's porch had become his sanctuary, a place to unwind as the world slowed down. One evening, he sat there with a beer, the sky bruised with sunset, crickets humming in the distance. The house behind him was quiet but not empty. Not anymore. He'd hung new curtains, added a rug, small touches that made it his. The woodworking studio was alive again, projects piling up, each one a step towards something solid. He thought about the past year, how it had cracked him open and forced him to rebuild. There were still scars, moments when a song or a smell would pull him back to Laura, but they were softer now, less like knives and more like old photographs. He wasn't the man he'd been, blindly trusting, oblivious to cracks. He was sharper now, more honest with himself, and there was freedom in that. Lily had been over a few nights ago, bringing takeout and a playlist of old soul tracks. They'd sat on this same porch, talking until the stars came out, her laughter weaving into the night. She'd noticed the change in him, leaning back in her chair with a knowing smile. "You seem lighter," she'd said, her voice soft. "Like you're carrying less." He hadn't answered, just nodded, but she was right. The weight of Laura's betrayal, of his own doubts, had loosened its grip. He was still figuring out what came next, but for the first time he wasn't afraid of the unknown. Ethan was in his studio, sanding a walnut chair, when his phone chimed with an email. He wiped his hands, glancing at the screen, and froze. Laura's name stared back at him, the subject line blank. For a moment he considered deleting it, unread, letting it sink into the void where her reports and lies now lived. But curiosity, or maybe closure, won out. He opened it, the words simple, unguarded in a way she'd never been in person. "Ethan, I don't expect you to reply, and I don't deserve it. I just need to say I'm sorry. I handled everything wrong, hurting you, hiding things. It wasn't about you. I got lost in my own mess, and I dragged you into it. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're happy. Laura." He read it twice, the words settling like dust. There was no anger, no rush of pain, just a quiet acknowledgement that this was her story now, not his. She was reaching out, maybe seeking absolution, but he didn't owe her that. He didn't owe her anything. Ethan set the phone down, the Sanders hum calling him back. The chair under his hands was smooth, its lines honest, a thing he'd made from nothing. He didn't reply to the email. He didn't need to. Laura's regret was hers to carry, and he was done holding it for her. Ethan's woodworking studio buzzed with new energy. The space, once a refuge from his unraveling life, had become a hub of creation, its walls lined with finished pieces and sketches for more. A regional magazine had reached out last month, wanting to feature his work in a spread about local artisans. The article, published last week, called his designs quietly bold, a marriage of function and soul. Ethan had read it with a mix of pride and disbelief, the words proof that he was building something real. He'd used the exposure to push forward, investing in new tools, a lathe, a better router that let him experiment with curves and inlays he'd only dreamed of before. Orders were coming in faster now, enough that he'd hired a part-time assistant. a wiry kid named Sam who showed up early and asked good questions. The studio wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was a business, a life taking shape. Ethan stood back one afternoon, wiping sawdust from his hands as he admired a new coffee table, its walnut grain gleaming under the shop lights. He felt a clarity he hadn't known in years, a sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. The divorce was final now, the papers signed and filed, Laura's name a footnote in his story. He wasn't running from that pain anymore. He'd walked through it, and come out stronger. Ethan met Ben for beers at a brewpub near the river, the kind of place with sticky tables and too many taps to choose from. They sat on the patio, the Portland skyline twinkling across the water, the air cool with early fall. Ben raised his glass, a grin breaking through his usual sharpness. "To surviving," he said, "and coming out better." Ethan clinked his glass, the IPA bitter and bright on his tongue. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said. "Seriously, Ben, you pulled me through." Ben waved it off, but his eyes softened. "You did the hard part. Took guts to face all that, to keep going. You did good, man." They talked for a while, about work, about Ben's latest case, about nothing in particular. But as the conversation lulled, Ethan found himself reflecting. He thought of the man he'd been a year ago, stunned, broken, searching for reasons in a silent house. That Ethan had trusted too blindly, loved too naively. He wasn't gone, not entirely, but he'd grown into someone new, a man who knew his worth, who built things that lasted. "I was thinking the other day," Ethan said, staring into his glass, "about who I was before all this. I don't miss him, not really, but I'm glad I got to become this." Ben nodded, no need for more words. They finished their drinks, the night stretching out like a promise. The porch was lit with string lights now, their warm glow pooling against the dusk. Ethan sat there with Lily, a bottle of wine between them, soft jazz drifting from a speaker inside. She was curled into a chair, a blanket over her knees, her laugh punctuating a story about a kiln misfire that had nearly ruined her latest batch of mug. "You should have seen it," she said, eyes dancing, smoke everywhere, me waving a towel like some deranged firefighter, total chaos. Ethan chuckled, the sound easy, unforced. "Sounds like my first try at dovetail joints. Sawdust for days and the box still fell apart." They traded stories, the wine glasses catching the light as they talked. Lily had become a constant these past weeks. Not a fixture, but a presence, like a favorite song you didn't tire of. There was no rush with her, no pressure to define what they were. Just this moment. As the music shifted to a slower track, Lily leaned forward, her gaze soft but steady. "You know, you've got this. Calm about you now," she said, "like you've settled into yourself." Ethan tilted his head, considering. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "For the first time in a long time, I'm just happy." He smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. They sat there, the night wrapping around them, glasses clinking softly as they toasted to nothing in particular. The world was out there, messy and unpredictable, but here, on this porch, Ethan had everything he needed. Loft, a light, and a horizon that finally felt